Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Blood Brothers podcast. Tonight I'm joined with, one of our favourite novelists, Adam Simcox. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Thank you for having me. It feels good to be an honorary blood brother for the evening.
Oh, man, you definitely are. Tonight we have a very, very special guest. It's none other than Mr. David Koepp. Screenwriter and novelist of all the best stuff ever. David, how are you?
Outstanding, thank you.
I hope that's an intro you can live with.
I'm fine with that. If everyone else wanted to adopt that, I would be all right.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we're here to talk about your new book, amongst all sorts of other things, but your new book is Aurora, coming from HQ Stories here in the UK. Could you tell us a little bit about Aurora?
Yes. So Aurora's it's a suspenseful book. I became interested in the idea of the power going out all over the place. It's something I made a movie about in 1996, so quite a while ago, called The Trigger Effect. But it was the focus was quite narrow. It was these three people who were together for a long weekend, and what is that like, and this unexplained power outage and trouble in a marriage and things like that. And I was fascinated even then by, well, what if I extended this? What if this were longer, and what if it were the whole world? And why might that happen? So over the years, I'd sort of collect string on the idea, and I came across the Carrington event, which was a coronal mass ejection from the sun, which is just an enormous burst of electromagnetic plasma that shoots out of the sun. Happens all the time, 3 times a day during periods of high solar activity. Almost all the time they miss the Earth, because the mathematical chances that we'll be, in exactly the right point in our orbit for impact or direct hit are very small. But it does happen every couple hundred years. And the last time it happened was 1859, and it became known as the Carrington event after the British astronomer who observed it. And it was a direct hit on the Earth. Now, the only electrical systems that were up and running at the time were the telegraph, and they all went down. Telegraph operators said their circuit boards burst into flame, wires melted, and the whole system required extensive repair. But it was the telegraph, and so though important, it didn't bring the world, to a screeching halt. And most people just thought it was a sort of interesting natural phenomenon. The aurora borealis was lit up all over the Earth for days on end, and then life went back to normal. But if and when a major CME were to hit the Earth directly now, everybody can imagine what it's like, because we're completely interdependent, dependent on the electrical grid. More so, it only increases more so in the last 20 years. Everything we do requires electricity. And I wanted to write a story about what would happen now if that happened. So I did.
Absolutely amazing. The concept and the idea of what if is such a big overriding question in your work, isn't it? I love how that you've brought this to novels. How has the jump from screenwriting to novels been? How has your process changed?
It changes some. I've been writing movies for 35 years. So my ideas tend to present themselves as movies. But 4 or 5 years ago, I wanted to try something different, because you gotta mix it up and try to shake off mediocrity by changing your game. And so I started writing what I thought was a movie idea in prose form. And it started out, the first paragraph, I thought, within a page, I noticed, and this is old news to you guys, but it was new to me. Within a page, I noticed, holy shit, I can do a bunch of stuff in this format that I can't do in movies. I can talk about what a character's thinking. I can say what they're feeling. I can talk about their 5th grade math teacher. It just was so liberating.
You can add so much meat on the bones.
Yes, I can digress. And,
Yeah.
I don't digress wildly because 35 years of movie writing, I need to keep the plot moving. It's just ingrained. And as a reader of books, I don't mind a few pages to talk me through the specifics of how, cricket works, but I really would like to get back to the plot at some point soon. So it was just very freeing. And I realized that, there was another way to tell stories. And so I enjoyed it enormously. It's also a lot quieter. Movies involve a lot of people. And, a book, most of the time, nobody knows or cares that you're writing.
I was curious about that because obviously the films you've done and you've directed a lot as well. Like obviously when you turn up on set each day, all those people are there for you. So obviously that brings with it a lot of stress and tension. Was it nice just to be able to sit down by yourself and say, no one's expecting anything from this from me. I can just go totally wild on it. Yes.
But you do lack the pressure of, I got to come up with something, because you can say, well, that's enough for today. And it's 10:45 in the morning. So a little external pressure is not a terrible thing.
No, that's true. That's true.
What about and here's another question, because obviously this is one of a unique interview for me to do, to be honest, David, because of what you've done prior to your work in novels. In the budget, usually when I'm thinking of something mad in a book that might cost hundreds of millions of dollars to do, I don't have to put the handbrake on. But whereas previously to writing your novels, you might have had to do that.
Oh, yeah. Budget is always a concern. Yes, in a novel, it matters not. The sun can explode. It doesn't matter. It would end life on Earth. So that might end your story abruptly. But but in movies, yeah, budget is a constant thing. You have to take into consideration going in when you write the script, who's it for? Because that dictates how expensive can it get. And should I be writing with an eye toward economy, or should I be writing with an eye toward spectacle and who cares how much it costs? And those are very different. Those are very different ways of writing and very different approaches to problems and different approaches to storytelling. The hardest stuff in movies is when you write to what you assume the budget will be and then realize you have half that. And then you start having people come running in and saying, boy, there's a hell of a war going on out there. You should see it, which I guess Shakespeare did know that he got away.
No, this is completely fascinating because obviously I think I'm on book 17 at the moment. So it's
man.
Yeah.
Sheer amount of typing involved.
Oh no, it's absurd. It's absurd. And my kids still think I'm a moron. After all
that's as it should be, though, Rob. You need to.
I know. I'm aware of this. I'm aware of my place in the food chain. But it's still. I've not had that. It's amazing how we all come to this profession of novel writing from very, very different areas, and we all face the same things when we get there, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you bring whatever you got, but that's all we have. When you talk to young writers, you say, well, that you have your point of view. That's the thing you've got. No one else has your set of experiences. Nobody else jammed their head full of the exact same things you jammed your head full of. So when you shake it up and start spitting out pages, that's you, and hold on to it, because that is all you've got.
Oh, I was curious about the tone and the subject matter of your two novels, because they're both quite apocalyptical, if that is a word. Was that a bit of a reaction to COVID, or were the ideas there before COVID? Just because I know that something I keep hearing a lot about is people don't want to hear about. They don't want apocalyptical stuff because they've kind of been living it. Whereas I actually really like those sort of novels, because usually the novel you're reading or the film you're watching about the apocalypse is a lot worse than the one you're living with, because at least we still got like Netflix and we could order Five Guys and stuff. There's no flesh eating thing. So I was just wondering how it came about, the two novels and the tone of it.
I think I just worry about things a lot. I go through life with a bit of an excess amount of anxiety. So, but also, I remember an interview with the director, Mike Nichols, once, and someone said, "Your films are always very dramatic. They're very, very dramatic things are always happening." And he just sort of looked at the interviewer strangely and said, "Well, I can't very well tell a story about how well it's all going." Which I thought was a good point. So yeah, I'm drawn to that stuff, but I disagree. I mean, I disagree with people who are saying nobody wants to read apocalyptic anymore. Isn't it fundamental to human nature that it's how we deal with our fears? Is we see stories about them. That's why horror movies are so big. That's how you deal with your fears. You let out all that terror and anxiety, and it's cathartic. So both novels were conceived before COVID. Aurora was written during COVID, and I thought when the pandemic started, I was about ready to start the book, and I thought, well, now I have to reconceive the whole thing. And then as we lived it a bit, and I think I wrote it from I wrote it summer and fall of 2020, so right in the middle of lockdown, and I found that the only thing it changed was that I had to acknowledge that the characters had been through this experience, and I think that there's a teenage boy in it who's 15, and they hear this thing is coming, and they go to the store to stock up on supplies, and he's seeing all the people rushing into the store, and he doesn't want to get out of the car, and he just says, I can't go through this again. And I thought that was the most salient point anybody made, was when the next crisis comes, because some will come, we might feel a sense of resignation, denial. I don't want this can't be happening. I'm not doing it. But then also just we'll realize we have the strength. We've been through it. We can do it. It's a bit like my family and I lived in England for 4 years, just until just a few years ago, and apparently there was a thing there called the Blitz. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Maybe
yeah. We don't like talking about it. It never gets mentioned.
But holy shit, does that shape the national character? And there's in a really valuable way. You get on with it. You must. And I think we've all now been through a bit of something like that.
No, you're right. I find it amazing that we forget so quickly, don't we? What previous generations have managed and been through. I know. So we live in Manchester, which is obviously a couple of 100 miles north of the Blitz in London, and but still the bombing hit up here, and my wife's. My wife's grandmother, when she was a baby, was posted into a chest of drawers during the Blitz and closed in at night. It's just incredible that this happened at all, isn't it? And this is miles away from the Blitz. This is 200 miles away from the Blitz. But it's just amazing, isn't it? And we're so quick to forget that as well. I don't want to forget that. I want to keep that sort of that spirit alive as much as I possibly can, I guess.
Yeah, I know my 15-year-old used to ask a few years ago, what was the big crisis when you were a kid? And I said, well, we were all afraid we'd be killed in a nuclear war. And he said, we don't really we have climate change, but it's a lot slower. It doesn't promise this apocalyptic thing. I said, don't worry, you don't really want your crisis. And then COVID came along, and he said, I think I know the one I'll tell my kids now.
He hopes.
No, it's so true. Because when I read Cold Storage, obviously it was before the the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic hit, it was like, I'm like, this is eerily like that novel I recently read, you know.
Well, it's a lot, Cold Storage is a lot more playful. It's clearly written prior to having had the experience of a worldwide play.
Absolutely. No, it felt like to me.
A lot of fun and games and barfing. A bit more somber.
It felt like to me like, you know, the pandemic plus the thing equals Cold Storage in a way, you know, like that kind of thing, that kind of mashed together.
Pitch.
Yeah, which would be a great pitch, wouldn't it? Yeah.
What was it that kind of pointed you towards novel writing, David? I mean, was there kind of one light bulb moment? Was it something you've been thinking about for a while?
I had thought about it a long time and thought I was just being a bit of a coward. They're difficult. And, you know, I also, you know, most of us live in fear of public humiliation. So another way to, but you get kind of used to it in the movies because, you know, it's the circus and they throw a lot of things at you. But a novel, I think I just had enough of other people's input for a while. And I really wanted those few quiet months. and it was great. So I think a combination of, you know, working up the nerve to do something that I felt I could or should do for a long time. And then I can't remember, I couldn't point to what particular movie experience I was coming out of, but it was probably not a good one where, you know, there was a little too much input for my liking.
Right.
Is that so? Because obviously I reading both of your novels, David, there's something that springs to mind as that's a flavor almost, but it's very hard to try and put into words, and it's probably going to be even harder to try and ask you to explain. But it's the nature of a blockbuster quality. Do you understand? I mean, Adam, do you understand what I mean when I say this? It's like there's something that is so it's blockbuster storytelling, I think, which I hope this doesn't come across as cheapening the word, but it's like it feels like so wonderfully big and all encompassing and sucks you in so massively that you can't help but be pulled along for the ride. And I know this is something that you have done right the way through your career with your screenwriting work as well, but you've carried it into your novels as well. That this kind of, I mean, it's like stories for everybody. I don't know. I'm finding it, I hope you can see, I'm finding it hard to explain this. I really am finding it hard to explain.
I think you said it earlier, and I wanted to say something then, which is, it's a what if, and if it's a good what if, those are the stories I've always been drawn to. I think for writers of my generation, especially male writers for some reason, and I think I've got a few years on you guys, but probably you might see if you feel the same way. The most influential movie or television show, hands down, was Twilight Zone.
Okay.
Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. I don't know how or when you encountered it. But if you found that and keyed into it between the ages of, say, 12 and 15, boy, does it stay with you. And there's a reason. It had some of the best science fiction writers of the era working on it. Science fiction and social fiction, you know, speculative, what would happen to society if. Serling himself, of course, Richard Matheson, probably being the best writer on the show. And I think a lot of what I've done in terms of original work since then could easily have been a Twilight Zone back then. And so I think there is a universal appeal to a really good what if. And if the what if is good enough, then the more realistic you can make the characters, and I've tried to make them very relatable characters, even the billionaire in Aurora, you know, the more you can point up the humanity in their you know, their human dimensions, then you have ordinary people in an extraordinary situation, which is like the whole reason I read books and watch movies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think your work is always where it's hit the mark is you paint on a big tapestry, you have these kind of big moments, but they have the light and shade, they have the small moments as well. And often they're the ones that kind of give it extra oomph, I think. They're the ones that kind of, the big spectacle, going to give it heart and give it grit and makes it stay with you.
Yeah, that's a question of point of view, I think, and restricting the point of view. If it's the bigger the event, I think the more you should restrict the point of view. Because when I wrote War of the Worlds for Spielberg back in 2005. And when we started, we sat down and actually made a list of what are the alien invasion movie things that we don't want to see in this movie. And, we don't want to see the White House. We don't want to see the Eiffel Tower. We don't want to see generals in a room talking in front of a big, a lot of things that we feel like we've seen that gave it this global dimension. We're like, let's restrict the point of view to if the protagonist doesn't see it, we don't see it. And if we want a great big view of something awful happening, then he needs to climb a hill to get that view.
Which he literally does in that film.
He does.
Yeah. He literally does that.
So it's helpful, like, as a writer, because, well, now I know what my limitations are. Let me operate within those. It's the same as saying this story must take place over, 2 hours, like real time. That tells you how to do it, because otherwise the world's too big and anything goes, and you can never show everything, and you can't, it's hard to find those small moments because everything's so big. So if you imply massive things going on elsewhere and then stay in the local point of view, I think it can be more powerful.
Wow. I love that, because when you boil down to the local, it's relatable to everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. And I wanted to say, well, let's take two communities. One is this small residential street in Aurora, Illinois, which is near Chicago. And the other, which is, and the other, which is this, doomsday bunker that this billionaire has built. And on Aurora, Illinois, his sister lives, because why not make them siblings and really, juice it up. And his sister lives and has done nothing to prepare for disaster, like the vast majority of us. And in this bunker silo, the billionaire's done everything. And just watch those two communities and see how they either come together or fall apart. And that'll be representative of the world as a whole.
It's so cool, man. Right. So we have a lot of writers. What's the expression really? It's not, because when you start writing, you're not a wannabe writer anymore, right? You are a writer. I just mean, like writers who are unpublished, who are looking for that break, who are looking for that moment. We have a lot of those writers who listen to us, and they love hearing the publication story, just like I do. So how was it when you turned to your, I don't know how it worked out. Did you turn to your agent and say, so I've got a novel? Is that how it went? Or
I did.
Did you?
Exactly what I did. I said, so I've got a novel. And they said, okay.
Funnily enough, that's what my agent says when I've got a new novel.
Isn't it the worst when you say to somebody, will you read my book? I feel so bad for them,
Yeah,
just so many words, aren't there?
I know.
And you do it to your friends too. It seems like
people
don't like you. If they wouldn't. So yeah, I said I told them I was doing this, and they were very supportive, because I don't know, why not? It might work out. And they helped me find an agent. I'm with CAA for movie work, and they actually have a book division in New York. So I had it a bit easier than some, in that someone was, willing to read my thing, and hoping to like it. I guess you're always hoping to like it.
Yeah, you've still got that awful audition process, haven't you? Where it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I please hope it's not a hunk of trash, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
That does go without saying. Yeah. Everything you turn in should say, and I really hope it's not a hunk of trash. Please know it wasn't intentional.
I'm so glad it's not just you, David.
It's that's a thing. So, and then, she liked it, Molly Glick, and we sent it out and found a publisher. It was, it's not a terribly likable story because it went well for me, but I did work very hard on it. It's not like,
of course. But right. This is what we talk about. Writers know writers, don't you? Like writing is a compulsion, isn't it? You just can't stop doing it. It doesn't matter where you are on that chain or on that timeline of it. You can't stop doing it.
Yes, and the good news now, what I find very encouraging, is there are so many places to put things. There, I wrote a few years ago. I wrote a story. It was just, I had this idea thing that happened to me, sort of, and I made a story, and it was about 60 pages. I think it was like 10,000 words, which is what it wanted to be, and that's far too long for a short story, and it's ridiculously short for a novel. It's not a novel. It's, what is that, an eighth of a novel?
It's a pamphlet over here, I think.
A high quality pamphlet.
Yeah, an extremely good pamphlet.
Yeah. So, but I started looking around, and my agent helped me by suggesting Audible, which was great, and they bought it, and that's all the length it wanted to be, and so Kevin Bacon read it. It was 2 hours long in the end, and it was fine. It was very good. But there is a place for your stories, in movies and TV. There's just this wild thirst for people to, people want to see stories in numerous forms. They want to see a movie, or 8 hours of a show, or 5 seasons of a show, or 3 episodes. This is what I love about the BBC, is they'll say, this feels like about 4 episodes, and that's it. And maybe a season 2 if we have a great idea. Otherwise, forget it. And I just love that, because they're not all the same lengths. But there's tons of places to put your story, is my point. So you shouldn't be daunted by, well, this doesn't feel like it's standard issue, for this length or medium or whatever.
Let's get to ask you about your kind of drive and like desire to write, because you've been in the game for quite a long time. I'm hesitating to say veteran, but you've been in the game for a long time.
I'll take veteran. It's it's not emeritus, that's where it starts.
Okay. There's not a lot you haven't achieved. I mean, do you still have the same compulsion to write? Do you ever look back? Are you able to look back on your career and say, yeah, I've done good? Or is there still the kind of the hunger for the next thing? Like you don't want to look back because you're looking forward?
I feel both. It is nice to say, oh, I accomplished some things. That feels great. But my mind is mostly on the next thing. I do still get ideas that I get more ideas than time to write them, which is great. As long as that keeps coming. I don't think they can force us into retirement too young. We're not like athletes. Generally, I think our work gets better as we get older, to a point.
I hope that's not because David, I like you were and I've held this in for a while this evening, but you were an icon to me, like completely an icon. Getting the Jurassic Park adaptation job, were you 28, something like that at the time?
Again, not a story that's engineered to make anyone like me.
No, but it is, because seriously, because when I was growing up, like I started writing because I wanted to tell stories, but I saw the fact that you were writing Jurassic Park 28 as something like, this isn't this isn't fairy tale stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it certainly can happen. And I think I had, again, I started writing young, and I worked hard. However, so I don't think it was completely undeserved that I started writing movies that got made. However, I'd be an idiot if I didn't think there was a healthy amount of luck involved in meeting the right people at the right point in my early career. I got to go to film school at UCLA, meet a bunch of people there. That made a big difference. Cohort, colleagues, people my age.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But we took each other seriously and encouraged each other. I met a guy named Martin Donovan when I was 23, who was 14 years older than me. We made our first movie, Apartment Zero, and wrote Death Becomes Her together. And Martin really took me seriously. And you need to meet somebody older than you who says, no, you're promising.
Yeah, you're not. This isn't rubbish. This is okay. Keep going.
Yeah. You gotta, those are essential. I was lucky to meet a guy named Casey Silver, who ran Universal at the time, who liked my writing and brought me there. And I suggested me to Spielberg, and then Spielberg, of course, how lucky is that to meet him and get on. And so I understand that I had a series of happy, encounters. So I don't know. I happened to meet some people who were really encouraging at the right time. And however, I also worked hard. So yes, it can happen, but you got to get lucky also.
But it also so happened that you were very, very good at what what you did as well.
Oh, I wasn't going to say
that. It doesn't hurt that bit.
It really.
The once in a generational talent thing, I guess.
If you can insist on labels, then
I had to really push myself to make that joke.
But you got there. You got there.
My dear-sated mother was not alive to hear that. She would have been very unhappy.
I just going to quickly ask you about Aurora. It's going to be a Netflix film, is that right? That's what Amazon tells me anyway, when I went on Amazon to pre-order it.
Yes. And may God bless and keep you for pre-ordering the book. Thank you. Yes, it's going to be Netflix. Catherine Bigelow is going to direct, the brilliant director of Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. She is great. I sent her the manuscript a few months back, and we've been looking for something to do together. And for a couple of years, and I said, maybe you'll like this, and she did. So I'm working on the screenplay version of it as we speak.
Oh, cool. Wow, man. Gosh, I don't know where we jump on from there, because there's so in my little heart. My heart has just gone bam.
She is, boy. As we work on the script, what's interesting is the script is an interpretation of the book. It's not just directly recording it, and that's really important in movies. And I learned finally, after a couple decades, you have to, as a screenwriter, try to look at this through the director's lens, the lens of their mind. How did they see these things? And because you can try to force your point of view on a director and try to get them to do something that they may not feel inside, but you'll fail. They'll either, first of all, they won't do it if they're any good. But if they happen to agree to do it and they don't really believe in it, they'll do it poorly. So don't do that. But if a director sees something clearly, you're really well advised to follow that, because they'll do it well. And Catherine, our worldviews may differ a bit in that mine is essentially kind of hopeful and a little sentimental. And I haven't detected a great deal of sentiment.
Honestly, I think you might actually, with those words, hopeful and sentimental, might have condensed in a lot of ways why your storytelling it resonates with so many people. I think you really might have done it with that. Seriously, looking across, because obviously your body of work is, I mean, it's gigantic, David. You know, like, and to think about it in those terms, like, and why I love the movies that you've been involved with, why I love the stories that you've been involved with, is hopeful and sentimental.
Well, thanks. I think I feel that. The thing of it is also, though, humanity's darker side is also quite fun to express in stories. And ultimately, it's a little bit more persuasive as an argument. I think hopeful is a choice, because the evidence is rather to the contrary. And so it's not very hard for me to adopt a slightly darker point of view. It's hard for me to adopt the hopeful point of view, because especially as you go on and life kicks you around a little, because none of us are immune from bad shit that can happen. You have to more consistently choose to be hopeful. And I think that's our gift. That's our challenge. That's what we must do. Anyway.
How are you finding adapting your own novel to a screenplay? Can you compartmentalize it? Can you see it through different eyes?
It takes me a little bit longer to get there to what you said than it does with someone else's book. Because you must get there. You must see it through different eyes. They're completely different media. You're working with other people who, are going to have other points of view. And they just are everything's different about them. It's kind of a miracle any book gets made into a movie. With someone else's book, I can read it and the first time say, oh, I'm doing that. Got to change that. Oh, he's got to go. Those choices are very easy to make. When you're doing it to your own book, you're like, but I love that guy. He can't go. So I think it takes me an extra draft or two, if it's my own book, to become ruthless about it. And even a little bit hostile toward the author of the novel. I think. Yeah, it takes a little longer.
Okay.
But I get there.
Oh man, there is no limit to the amount of questions I could ask you at this point. But we're going to play a game in a moment. Would you be up for a game, David?
Do I keep all my clothes on?
Yeah.
If
I made that mistake the first time I came on the show. But...
I mean, it's an optional.
It's optional.
Don't listen to his lies, David. Don't listen to his lies.
I know Adam's been a guest with us before.
Yeah. Once bitten.
Before we do that, though, I would like to ask, what is the most satisfying? You mentioned the word piece of work that you've turned in. What's the most satisfying piece of work that you've turned in, where you thought when you turned it in, this is as close to what I intended as I can get?
Gosh.
Sorry, that's I feel quite bold in asking that.
That's
I'm so sorry.
No, that's good. I'm trying to think of, really it's a question of what are the first drafts where I felt like that works. And, because after first drafts, and I have to mostly look at screenplays because I've done so many of them compared to novels. So of Cain and Abel, which novel do I prefer?
Brackets, they're both very good. So,
so I think that I was very pleased with the first draft of War of the Worlds. That one just felt like I felt like I was onto something there. And then, but it's hard because your memory is colored by how other people receive it. And Spielberg.
But the thing is, David, I got a prickle of tears when you said that, because I love that movie desperately. I really love that movie, and because of these movies that you're talking about, you were responsible for so much enjoyment for me and my family. You really are.
Well,
I know that's sorry, we've gone into fawning mode very quickly here, and I didn't mean it for it to go that way quite so early. But
well, I can also point to things that then never went anywhere. Brian De Palma and I developed a script about Howard Hughes in '98, probably, called Mr. Hughes, that I think remains, maybe the best thing I've done. And it only got one draft because it was an expensive movie. Nick Cage was going to play Howard Hughes and Clifford Irving.
God!
Oh wow!
Yeah, he was going to play Hughes and Irving. Clifford Irving being the novelist who wrote the fake called authorized biography, and it was a delightful story. It was 180 pages long, which is a 3-hour movie, and Brian, Nick, and I had just done a movie together called Snake Eyes. And between the time I started writing the script and was hired to write the script, and we turned it in, Snake Eyes had opened and not done particularly well. So the idea that it was Disney at the time, I don't know why it was at Disney. That's an odd place for it to be, but it was. And between then, we were red hot. Brian and I had just come off Mission Impossible, and Nick had come off winning an Oscar, and we made Snake Eyes. It didn't make a ton of money, and we turned in a 3-hour Howard Hughes script. We were dead before we walked in the door. There was no possibility they were gonna. But I was very happy with it. I was very happy with a movie I did recently called Kimmy. Steven Soderbergh directed. That was also a very solid first draft, and he did a wonderful job with that. Those are a few of the ones I liked.
Awesome. Oh, thank you. Now to go to, as Monty Python said, now for something completely different. So we're going to talk about what we like to talk about on this podcast is we all get bad reviews, don't we? All we like across the gamut. We all do. We all do.
Those do occur.
Yes, they do. So I put my favorite 1-star reviews on mugs around my house. So I drink out of mugs with people telling me how crap I am.
You're a proper masochist.
Nah, we show them. I'm gonna show you today. So what we've done is this is the 1-star superstar game. And what we do is we find someone who rated, sadly, one of your books 1 star. We've gone with Cold Storage.
And then we call them on the phone.
Absolutely. And we put author and reviewer together.
I'm already in their house, David. I'm already in their house.
You're behind the curtains, aren't you, Adam?
Absolutely. Just give me the word.
Man.
Give me the word.
This is like, what was it? Noel Edmonds' Crinkly Bottom. What was it called? House Party. It was, yeah. So we've got someone here who reviewed Cold Storage 1 star, but he also reviewed a silent camper van fridge.
Say that one again.
A silent camper van fridge. So what did he give it? Did he give it 1 star or 5 star? This is the contest. David Koepp versus Adam Simcox. This is what happened.
It's finally the matchup the world's been waiting for.
So David or Adam, 1 star or 5 star for the silent
how
camper
is it
van
silent?
Fridge?
What is silent about it?
It's in the title.
It doesn't rattle. It doesn't rattle. The compressor it's a very sophisticated compressor.
It must.
And let's face it, in your camper van, the last thing you want to do is listen to the goddamn compressor turn on.
Right.
So
1 star or 5 star. The fridge.
Did he give the fridge 1 or 5? Adam,
that's it. That's what you're picking, David. 1 or 5.
You get first, David. You're the guest.
Did he love this thing or did he hate it?
I think he loved it. I think because I think no, wait a minute. To be moved to write with motivation, I must post about this silent camper van. I'm going to guess that he gave it 1 and that he put silent in quotes.
Oh, so you've got 1 extra. You're giving a reason here.
Yeah, this guy had a bad night's sleep and he had to
It's a very strong answer. I've got a feeling that I don't think I've ever met anyone that would write a review about a fridge magnet. So I think this guy is all in on the fridge magnet.
He loves it.
5 stars. I think it's 5 stars.
I'm so sorry, Adam. David takes the point. David, he says he recommends purchasers check the 12-volt capacity immediately. It works fine on 240 volts, just transferred it to 12 volts after having the electric sorted, and the light doesn't work and everything freezes. 1 star. So, wow. These are your readers, David.
At least he bought the book. That's the main thing.
At least he bought the book. But
Now, does this game involve now reading his 1-star review of my book?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. We don't. Although, Sherry,
I tell you what, do you have it in front of you?
Oh, David, I can't do this.
Last time we'll do. I would like you to start reading it.
David,
I'm going to do
this.
this.
Is not acceptable.
I'm going to see how long I can make. When I say stop, you must stop immediately.
Right. Okay. The last time this happened was.
But don't read too fast. Don't read too fast.
The wonderful Sherry LaPena asked me to read her 1 star out, and it was the worst. Why does this always happen to me? It was the worst moment of possibly my life. Okay.
But so don't read fast. Read fairly slowly. And when I say stop, you must stop immediately.
Okay.
And we'll see if I can make it to 10 seconds. All right. Okay. Ready?
Whatever happens, David, you're a complete legend.
Thank you. Are you ready?
1 star.
Okay. Ready? Wait. Ready? Set.
Okay.
Go.
1 for the charity shop.
Stop. Okay. So I got 2.8 seconds. I wasn't planning to do that either.
David, I'm sorry. Have we broken you? I'm so sorry.
You're a charitable guy. I mean, that's what I'm taking from that review. You're a charitable guy.
Yes.
And if he hated the book and he wants to go give it to the charity shop, he's a sadist. Why would you do that to people?
I know. Oh dear. Yes. Oh my God. So that goes into the pantheon of awkward moments for me, right? Alongside Sherry LaPena. Excellent. Love you, Sherry. Thank you so much for that one. Oh my gosh. So another question that we always like to ask, David, is while we've still got a little bit of time, I'm gonna ask the same of Adam, because Adam will not tell you, I don't think, if I ask him to tell you what he writes, but he writes incredible stuff. Adam, I don't know. It's like, right. So it's a deceased detective solving murders in present day, cities, etc. But that detective has help from the other world. And this is it's just mega. It's just absolutely mega. So he is straddling genres with what he's doing. Is this right to say, Adam, that in our industry, doing that kind of thing would be classed as straddling genres? Is that right?
Straddling genres and also career suicide. One of the two. It's a supernatural crime thriller series. So it's sort of Line of Duty. I don't know if you know that show. / The Shield crossed with Ghost. So the first book, which came out last year,
such a great pitch, man.
The first book last year is about a detective who has to solve his own murder.
Oh, DOA, I like it. That's great.
Yeah, and then the second one that comes out later this year, that detective has to catch a serial killer called the Generation Killer who murders the youngest and the oldest members of a family.
I love what he is doing, David. I love what this guy's doing. But if you had no restriction on genre, no restriction on anything, and your next novel could be about anything on the planet, where would you go? What would you write about? What genre would you like to dip into?
What has traditionally been career suicide in film, and probably somewhat applies to books, is black comedy. They just don't do well. A lot of them are more beloved movies or books, but you can't convince. I love to write about truly awful people doing really selfish things, and it's very hard to get people on board with that. The right people that I like to hang around with love them, but unfortunately I don't think we number enough in terms of book or movie ticket buyers.
It's very true, because my favorite book ever is Kill Your Friends. I don't know if you've read that book.
No, but I mean, I'm in with the title alone.
I think you'd like it. It's by a writer called John Niven. It's about a radio record music exec who kind of just trying to climb the slippery slope. It's set in the 90s in kind of Britpop in England. It's an absolutely incredible book. No way would it get released today, I don't think, because it's frequently outrageous. But my first novel I wrote was that was one of my comps, Kill Your Friends. Right. And they said, yeah, we don't want that.
Your face just goes completely expressionless.
Yes. It does. If they invite me in, they'd be throwing me out. But
another thing we asked David is we always talk about what we're all reading at the moment, because we're all lovers of books and the written word, aren't we? So what are you reading at the moment?
I just picked up it's not a novel. It's Paul Hirsch, the legendary film editor, wrote a book about his adventures in various editing rooms, including a lot of Brian De Palma movies, a lot of Star Wars, a lot of stuff, and he just tells great stories, and I love getting inside someone else's process. So I'm fascinated by that. What about you guys?
Awesome, Adam. What are you reading?
I am reading The Turnout by Megan Abbott.
Nice.
I'd heard a lot about Megan Abbott, a lot of praise. It's the first book I've read, and I'm going to go blitz the back catalogue after this. It's so good. It's kind of crime. It's very grimy and claustrophobic, set in a ballet school in New York. Yeah, it's the best book I've read this year, I think. Terrific.
Really?
Yeah.
Fine.
Very, very cool. I just finished recently The Island by Adrian McKinty. Yeah, it's outstanding. I mean, the guy, he do you know, he was on the podcast recently, David, and I was lucky enough to know him kind of vaguely before the wonderful success he's experiencing. And I remember messaging him and saying, when's your next book out? And he said, I don't have a deal. I don't know when it's happening. I have no idea. And then everything exploded for him. And it was just, I just can't be happier about that. I really can't. It's just wonderful. So I finished that. It's just ridiculously great. It's got that same kind of blockbuster storytelling that a certain Mr. David Koepp might be familiar with. But right now I'm digging into All the Wicked Games by Lauren North, who drives so far under the subcutaneous skin of being a father and being a parent and being a human being that it's staggering and it's frightening. And it's like that compulsive, like, I want to read it, but oh my gosh, it's going to reveal things about myself when I read it. Yeah. So yeah, okay. and that kind of stuff. I want to be challenged when I read stuff. I want to be staggered. I want to be pushed, and this is doing that in spades. So yeah, that would be my pick tonight. Certainly,
yeah. Sounds good.
David, do you have a third novel in the pipeline?
Yes. Well, it's actually it's still in the earth and has to be drilled out and then put in the pipeline.
like the drillers from Armageddon.
I'm afraid it exists only in my head at the moment. But yes, I would. There's a book I'd like to write. And as all of my children have told me at one point or another, when they have a paper due at school the next day, all I have to do is type it up.
That's outstanding. And because I've got two people on here who are both on their second book, Adam, do you have a third book in the pipeline?
I do. It's handed in, actually.
Is it?
Handed in. It is.
Oh, you monster.
Sorry.
You're killing it, man.
Sorry. Yeah, that'll be out next year. I think it's my favorite of the three, actually.
You couldn't give a whisper of a title, could you?
Yeah, the title, unless they tell me differently, is The Ungrateful Dead.
Oh, outstanding.
Oh, very good.
Outstanding.
And it's in the same series.
Yeah, it's in the same series. Yeah. Whether there'll be any more after that, we shall see. But I'm kind of working on something else in case there isn't.
Oh, this is outstanding, bud. Thank you. Right, Adam, thank you so much for joining me tonight. David, thank you. I think, oh dear, I always get this point because on this podcast I get to talk to people that really have influenced me. But honestly, your work and what you've done to this point and beyond has just influenced me so much. I mean, you had me writing a Jurassic Park 3 screenplay at the age of 16, and it featured Jean-Claude Van Damme, by the way. So,
that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, and he was roundhouse in Raptors, by the way. So you know. But I just, for me, my family, so many moviegoers out there, I cannot thank you enough for the enjoyment you've given us and given me personally for everything you've done. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to get to do it. And I try to remember that on days when I'm feeling, cranky or that it's a hell of a job to have. And I'm grateful to have.
The amount of people that got in touch with me when they heard that we were talking to you tonight is ridiculous, seriously. But also what I would urge is that David's career in novels is sensational. So what David is doing in novels is blockbuster movies come to life. Get involved, get reading them, buy them in your droves, listeners, please, because they are absolutely sensational. So thank you so much, David. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate everything, mate. Me. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys. Bye.
Cheers.
Hi, I'm Rob.
I'm Simon.
And I'm James.
We want to talk about those movies. Those supposedly bad movies. Those movies that bombed.
To see if they weren't that bad after all, join us every other Tuesday on the For Your Reconsideration podcast, part of the Pod Dojo podcast network.
You can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, and all your usual podcast apps.
And it won't cost you a solitary bean, mate.
It's like it's free.
It's just like it's free.